Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a subject that, well, it often gets whispered about, or maybe just ignored completely, despite the fact that it impacts a huge number of people and really affects the health of relationships all over the world.
It really does.
We're diving deep into the science, the psychology, and, look, the actual roadmap for getting better ejaculation control, what most people call premature ejaculation, or PE.
And this deep dive, it's built on material that's refreshingly direct. It's scientific, practical. It really cuts through the usual, embarrassment and secrecy around this.
Yeah.
Our goal isn't just to kind of talk around the problem. It's to pull out the clinical facts, take apart those tempting but often useless clickbait headlines like, do these 5 things.
Right, the instant fixes.
Exactly,
Yeah.
the ones that promise instant cures. Instead, we want to lay out a clear, actionable path. It takes dedication, maybe 3 to 4 months, but it leads towards real, permanent improvement.
That's key. And we really need to normalize this conversation, first off. One of the big takeaways from all our material is that this isn't some kind of personal failing. It's actually a widespread physiological thing, psychological too.
Absolutely.
And while, yeah, the main symptom happens to one person, the impact, that's felt by the couple. So the solution has to involve both. We're going beyond just the mechanics here, really looking at temperament, anxiety, how it all plays out in long-term relationships, intimacy.
The sources give us a pretty comprehensive map. It covers the psychology, the physiology, the relationship side of things. It's designed to guide you, the listener, from feeling maybe isolated or flawed to actually becoming, well, an expert in self-control.
It sounds like it demands real effort, though.
It does demand dedication, no question, but it comes with a clear promise. Mastery is achievable.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with the basics, we need to define what we're actually talking about here and maybe set up a scientific baseline because early feels so subjective. What's the clinical reality?
That subjectivity is exactly why we lean on the data. Officially, we're defining this as the involuntary ejaculation reflex during intercourse.
Yep.
Now, everyone says premature ejaculation, but technically, the more accurate term is probably uncontrolled or involuntary ejaculation. It's about timing, sure, but more than that, it's about control.
Right, the lack of control.
Precisely.
Right.
And just to hammer that key point home again, this is a common problem that the couple experiences together because satisfaction isn't reached, even if the physical event is primarily with the man.
So what are the numbers that actually matter here? If someone listening is struggling, they're probably comparing themselves against some, I don't know, mythical ideal they have in their head.
Mm-hmm.
What does the science say? Where does the stress really start duration-wise, and what's the average?
We have some very specific benchmarks, actually. Scientific studies looking across different cultures, they show that both partners start feeling significant psychological relationship stress when intercourse duration consistently falls below a pretty hard benchmark, and that's 1 minute.
1 minute, 60 seconds.
Yeah. If you're reliably under 60 seconds, standard medical practice clearly sees that as PE. It needs attention.
Okay. But what if someone's, lasting a bit longer than a minute, maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes? There's probably a tendency to think, phew, okay, I'm not that bad, and maybe stop looking for help. But that doesn't automatically mean the couple's satisfied.
Not at all. And that's where the average comes in. It gives crucial perspective.
Mm-hmm.
The globally accepted, scientifically measured average baseline duration for intercourse, it's roughly 4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay.
And this is where the prevalence data becomes honestly a huge relief for many people because it frames the whole issue as more of a distribution curve, not some kind of black and white illness.
Okay, let's talk numbers then. Give us the prevalence data clearly. How common is this, really?
Sure. So when we look at the lifelong form, that's the kind someone has experienced basically since they started having sex, often linked to deeper neurological stuff or temperament that affects about 5% of the general male population. Right. These are the men who really struggle to get much beyond that 1 minute mark consistently. However, when we look at the broader picture, the percentage of men falling below that 4 minute average we mentioned, that number just balloons. It jumps significantly to around 30% of the male population.
30%. Wow. Okay, that's nearly 1 in 3 men not hitting that average baseline.
Mm-hmm.
That statistic alone, it completely changes the conversation, doesn't it?
It really does.
It moves it away from being this deeply shameful personal flaw to being, well, a normal, frustrating, but normal variation in human sexuality that just needs some skill development, some training.
Exactly. And this leads us straight into that critical philosophical shift that our sources emphasize. We almost have to adopt this core belief that every man is a candidate for premature ejaculation until proven otherwise.
Huh. That sounds a bit negative at first hearing.
It's not meant to be. It's more like a call to arms for developing skills. It's about shifting that internal story you tell yourself.
I actually find that perspective kind of liberating in a way. You're not sick, you're not fundamentally flawed, you're just normal, and you're part of this massive group that, well, needs to learn some advanced techniques.
Precisely. It's like learning to be a better driver, not trying to fix a broken engine.
Yeah.
And that mindset shift. That's the absolute first, most crucial step towards making any real progress. You have to let go of the shame, the self-judgment.
Because that just adds anxiety, right?
Massively. If you see yourself as broken, you pour anxiety into the situation. And anxiety, as we'll get into, is like the primary fuel that ignites that involuntary reflex. The body just can't learn control when it's stuck in panic or self-blame mode.
Okay, so if this tendency is so common, affecting, you said, 30% of men, it must be rooted in something pretty fundamental, maybe something evolutionary, not just, bad luck.
Absolutely. The sources really dive into this idea of an evolutionary advantage, suggesting the issue is largely tied to basic survival instincts. Well, think about the male of almost any species out in the wild. The one who can get the job done quickly and maybe often has a huge reproductive advantage, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
The male needs to ejaculate fast, protect himself quickly from predators or rivals, and pass on his genes. Speed, in nature, often equals survival.
Survival of the quickest, quite literally. Our ancestors who were taking their sweet time probably got eaten mid-app.
Something like that. And the modern-day fallout from this ancient programming, according to the sources, is actually quite telling. Couples dealing with PE often report higher rates of unwanted pregnancies.
Really?
Yes, it kind of proves the reflex is biologically successful in a way, even if it creates massive social and relationship friction for us now.
Wow. So how does this natural quickness show up in modern life, in personality? You mentioned temperament.
Yes, what's fascinating is how PE often seems to be a direct reflection of someone's core temperament, which is, hard to change fundamentally, but it's definitely manageable. It just requires specific counter training.
Okay, so what's the typical profile look like? I found this part striking that these guys are often high achievers.
Yes, that's often the case. The profile described is frequently men who, well, they speak quickly, they eat quickly, they can't sit still, hate waiting.
Impatient.
Very. Constantly driven, always busy, often very successful professionals running fast-growing businesses, managing intense schedules. They thrive on speed, on efficiency.
Which presents this huge paradox, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Their whole life is lived at high velocity. Speed equals success for them. But then, suddenly in bed, they're expected to slam on the brakes. That's totally counter to their whole way of operating.
It's a profound psychological clash. Premature ejaculation is actually described in the sources as a kind of handicap of this otherwise very successful temperament.
A handicap of success.
In a way, yes. The nervous system is just wired to react instantly, so when it faces high excitement, intense pleasure, which the brain might even register as just another high-stakes task, it defaults to the quickest, most efficient solution it knows, the involuntary reflex.
Okay, so this implies that the real solution has to include stuff outside the bedroom, too.
Yeah.
Things that sort of recalibrate the whole nervous system. The sources mention something counterintuitive. Intentional stillness.
Precisely. If your default is fast, then learning how to be truly intentionally slow is almost a prerequisite for success in the bedroom. The specific, non-sexual task they recommend is pretty simple, but hard. Spend 30 minutes alone. Every single day.
Doing what? Meditating?
Not necessarily, just being. Put the phone on silent, sit somewhere public like a cafe, and just watch your surroundings. Don't do anything. Don't scroll, don't plan, don't work in your head. Just observe.
Okay, wait. I have to push back a bit here. For someone wired for constant action, wouldn't forcing them to sit still just crank up their anxiety? Wouldn't they just mentally plan their next meeting or want to jump out of their skin?
That's exactly the initial reaction. And the sources are clear. It will feel incredibly difficult at first. They even use the phrase, it might feel like death. But the point isn't really relaxation in that moment. The point is to teach the nervous system intentional indifference to that urge to be constantly busy or productive. It's a regulation exercise. You're training your system to learn that stillness is actually safe, that the world won't collapse if you're not constantly doing. And this regulating effect is fundamental, because if you can't slow down outside the bedroom, you've got almost no chance of executing control inside it.
That makes the connection between general anxiety high desire, and the physical act much clearer. Because often men who ejaculate early, they actually have high sexual desire, right? They love sex, usually get hard easily, might even be able to go again quickly afterwards.
Yes, exactly. For many of them, sex feels almost like high adrenaline sports.
Right.
It's exciting, super pleasurable, but also kind of frightening because of that looming fear of failure. And this high-stakes feeling leads right into seeing PE as a kind of panic reflex. It actually shares similar roots with things like vaginismus in women. The issue is almost never a defect in the penis itself. It's a panic state where the central nervous system sends out danger signals and the body just involuntarily tenses up and forces the reflex.
So the nervous system, not the organ, is the real target for intervention.
Yeah.
The sources talk about this idea of the wise organ. How does abstract anxiety, like fear of intimacy, actually trigger a physical reflex like ejaculation?
It's a really powerful defense mechanism, essentially. The body perceives these abstract worries, fear of catching something, fear of not being good enough, even a deep-seated fear of closeness, of vulnerability. It perceives them as immediate physical threats.
Right.
So the wise organ, as they put it, sometimes just shortens the encounter. It's trying to prevent its owner, its head, from getting into what it perceives as bigger trouble. It's a way to minimize exposure to that perceived threat.
So the quickness is the body trying to shield the man from the emotional pain or abstract danger it associates with deep intimacy. It forces a short, fast, maybe superficial encounter to keep him safe.
Exactly. It's like having an internal bodyguard designed for surviving the jungle that's now accidentally sabotaging the connection needed in a modern relationship.
And when that internal bodyguard mechanism meets a partner, well, that individual anxiety must create this powerful negative feedback loop, right? The vicious cycle that poisons the intimacy.
Absolutely. The sources are, frankly, quite blunt about the partner's experience. Premature ejaculation almost inevitably leads to a sharp drop in the woman's sexual desire. Why? Because she's chronically unsatisfied and she ends up having to suppress her own sexuality.
There's that concept they use, the worth taking a bath for idea. That really hit home.
It's powerful because it details the woman's sort of emotional cost-benefit analysis. Imagine the whole routine. Maybe she takes a shower, gets ready for bed, dries her hair. There's an investment of time and energy. If the actual intercourse then lasts, say, 20 seconds, and she feels completely unfulfilled, that whole cycle, which might cost her a couple of hours of sleep she really needs, starts to feel utterly meaningless. She concludes, quite logically from her perspective, that the whole process just isn't worth taking a bath for.
Which leads to avoidance.
Active avoidance, reduced initiation, which then, of course, can make the man feel rejected or think his partner is just cold or uninterested, feeding his performance anxiety even more. It's a nasty loop.
But sometimes the dynamic flips, right? The woman's desire, or maybe her frustration, actually increases the pressure on the man, which then makes the PE happen even faster.
Exactly. The expectation itself becomes the enemy, and the sources give a strong warning here about what they call the running away and postponing problem.
What's that?
It's where the couple has this unspoken agreement, like, yeah, we'll fix this eventually. But then years just drift by with no real tangible effort being made. And that lack of visible dedication, that's what generates deep anger and resentment in the partner.
So it's not just the problem itself, but the perceived lack of effort to fix it.
Precisely. Women often say, look, the problem is upsetting, sure, but seeing him make no dedicated effort to solve it, that's what makes them feel truly angry, unheard, unimportant.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Relationally, PE stops being just about timing and becomes almost a communication tool. The material suggests sometimes if a woman feels generally ignored or unheard in the relationship outside the bedroom, she might maybe unconsciously use the PE issue as a kind of weapon to express her general dissatisfaction, because it's the one thing that gets his attention.
That's a really profound relational insight in the source material. The core issue might not even be the sex, fundamentally. It might be that she feels completely unacknowledged by her partner day to day.
Right.
And the PE becomes the one button she can push that reliably gets a reaction, gets his focused attention when nothing else does.
So the big takeaway for listeners, particularly the men listening,
the takeaway has to be, gentlemen, you need to listen to your partner every day. Take her needs, her feelings seriously across the board. Because if you don't, one single problem like PE can easily trigger 3, 4, 5 other issues, either out of retaliation or just sheer frustration.
So stripping it all back, PE gets exposed as really a symptom of something bigger. It's fundamentally a problem of not being able to get close, maybe fearing closeness. It's described as almost a disease of our modern age, not trusting, fearing getting hurt, being unable to truly open up, a kind of masculine defense mechanism.
And this fear hits women particularly hard because, generally speaking, they often need that intimacy, that connection, more deeply than men do. For many women, that is the true meaning of sex.
The emotional connection.
Exactly. So if the encounter is always short, always maybe a bit frantic, that fundamental emotional need just isn't met, which understandably leads pretty quickly to defensiveness, irritability, a general cooling off in the relationship. The physical act is just the vehicle. The destination is connection.
Which means even while a man is starting to work on the hardcore physiological control stuff, he absolutely cannot let the emotional side slide. The sources have some pretty direct advice on that.
Oh, the advice is categorical. Even if your control isn't great yet, you must never neglect the basics. Touching often, making physical contact whenever possible, showing affection, making those small romantic gestures.
Keep the emotional bank account topped up.
Exactly. If you commit to that, if you keep the peace and affection flowing at home, then even if the sex act itself is still challenging during the retraining phase, at least the foundation of trust and warmth remains. It makes the harder work much easier to tackle together.
Let's touch on the eating the grape concept. That highlights what the man might be missing out on too, right? This is just about fixing it for her.
Absolutely not. The idea is if the partner is involved, supportive, the whole process, the grape, becomes much sweeter for everyone. And the material points out something crucial. Many men who ejaculate quickly, they report things like, my semen just flows out. I don't really feel much. I don't get it. Often, this is because of underlying issues with the pelvic floor muscles. Maybe they're weak, maybe they're dysfunctional. So he's ejaculating physically, yes, but he might never have experienced a real, deep, full-bodied orgasm.
So he doesn't even know what he's missing.
Kind of like a child who's only ever read about chocolate but has never actually tasted it. He doesn't have a reference point for what's possible.
So successful treatment isn't just about lasting longer. It's about the man potentially achieving greater body awareness, maybe experiencing a much deeper, more satisfying orgasm himself. It becomes a win-win, moving towards genuinely richer, more meaningful sex for both.
That's the ultimate goal, yes.
Okay, let's shift to the practical roadmap now, the what to actually do. And we have to start, it seems, with some serious warnings about the misinformation that's out there, especially online. Those instant, often radical fixes.
Yes, the sources are very clear on this. They strongly caution against these sensational, often invasive procedures you sometimes hear about. Things like burning nerves, cutting nerves, freezing nerves to try and reduce sensitivity.
Or injecting fillers.
Or injecting fillers into the organ, yes. These should absolutely not be the first port of call.
Why are they considered so risky?
For the vast majority of PE cases, remember, that's potentially 30% of men. These procedures should only ever be considered as an absolute last resort. We're talking about really severe, highly resistant forms, like maybe someone who ejaculates without any penetration happening at all.
Okay.
For most guys, the risks just massively outweigh any potential benefit. You're looking at risk of permanent loss of sensation, potential erectile dysfunction down the line.
Oh, wow.
And often, the effects are only temporary anyway, meaning you might need repeat procedures. Plus, crucially, the sources note that fillers can sometimes cause these sort of mole-like visual deformities.
That doesn't sound good.
No. And a partner might find that really unattractive. So you could be trading one problem for a potentially permanent aesthetic issue or a loss of feeling. It's generally not worth the gamble.
That's a really powerful warning. Needs to be heard loud and clear. Now, what about the more common DIY trap? Guys reading an article online and trying Kegel exercises or maybe those stop-start masturbation techniques all on their own. Our sources suggest that's often useless or can even make things worse.
This is probably the single most important technical point in the whole roadmap. The reason those DIY efforts often fail or backfire is that in most PE cases, the pelvic floor muscle system itself is fundamentally flawed right from the start. It's not just a simple pump you can easily train like, say, your bicep. It's this complex network, like a suspension bridge of interconnected muscles. And often, the man has no real idea what sensation he should even be aiming for when he tries to contract or relax them.
Okay. And you mentioned two main types of flaws in that muscle system.
Broadly speaking, yes. You usually see one of two major issues. Either the muscles are hypertonic.
Meaning too tense.
Exactly. Excessively tense, tight, kind of locked up, often linked back to that high-speed, high-anxiety temperament we discussed earlier. For these men, trying to contract the muscle doing a standard Kegel actually makes the problem worse.
How?
It just increases the tension further, locking that reflex even tighter. What they actually need first is relaxation training, learning how to let go of that tension.
So if you're hypertonic, doing Kegels is like slamming the brakes harder on a car that's already got the handbrake fully locked on. Counterproductive.
Precisely. Then the other common problem is hypertonic.
Meaning too weak.
Right, the muscles are weak. But when the person tries to train them, maybe following online instructions, they mistakenly end up recruiting and working all the wrong muscles. They use their abs or their thigh muscles or their glutes.
So they feel like they're doing something, making an effort.
They feel effort, yes, but they're strengthening the auxiliary muscles, not the deep, correct pelvic floor muscles that actually control the reflex.
So the bottom line here is, you can't just guess. You really need professional guidance to know what's going on with your specific muscles.
Absolutely essential. You really need a physiotherapist, one who's experienced in pelvic floor therapy specifically. They can accurately diagnose if you're hypertonic or hypotonic.
And then what?
Then they teach you proper muscle awareness, how to isolate the right muscles. Crucially, how to relax them if they're too tight. Strengthening only comes later. It's the very last step, and only once you've mastered the relaxation and the isolation.
Okay. Let's also debunk another common idea. The strategy of just having repeated intercourse. Well, it didn't work the first time, maybe I'll last longer the second time or the third.
Yeah, that's a common compensatory tactic, but it's a pretty poor long-term solution. For one thing, it gets much harder to manage as you get older.
Right.
And more importantly, it completely misses the point about connection and quality. The sources really stress a much better, more sustainable goal. Focus on quality, not quantity. Try to adopt the mindset of, okay, let it be 1-0 for us tonight, but let's make it a truly memorable match.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly. The quality of that single connected encounter is far more valuable than just racking up attempts.
And speaking of trying to score more goals, there's a serious warning about using erection-inducing drugs like Viagra or Cialis, specifically to try and last longer or have multiple rounds.
Yes, a really crucial warning there. Do not use those drugs as a crutch to artificially score more goals. While they do increase blood flow and might allow for repeated attempts, they carry a really high risk of creating psychological dependence.
How so?
Once you start relying on them, you can actually amplify the performance anxiety, which, remember, is often at the root of the PE problem itself. You start thinking, oh God, I only have one shot without the pill. And that thought process can easily trigger performance anxiety-related erectile dysfunction the moment you try to have sex naturally again. You risk swapping one problem for another.
Okay. So the real solution involves a more fundamental shift, a structured change in behavior, focusing on foreplay, being present in the moment. The issue seems to be that men who ejaculate early often rush towards penetration because that's the scary part.
Exactly. They're focused on facing his greatest fear as soon as possible. The logic, often subconscious, is fear-based. If foreplay goes on too long, I'll get too aroused and lose control immediately upon entry, so I need to get straight to it.
But that doesn't work either, usually.
Right, because the problem is anxiety-driven. They often still ejaculate early anyway, which just reinforces the fear and the rushing behavior. You have to break that pattern. Learn to become truly present with your partner. Savor the connection, focus on the feeling, and kind of forget about the clock entirely.
Okay, so let's detail the recommended approach for home exercises, the phased approach. This comes after the physio has helped get the pelvic floor muscles working correctly, right?
Yes, this is built on that foundation. It's a progressive, measured plan. Phase 1 involves engaging in lovemaking, but without penetration, for at least a month.
A whole month, no intercourse. That sounds challenging.
It is challenging, but the purpose is deeply psychological. You're deliberately separating pleasure, arousal, and intimacy from the pressure and the perceived threat of ejaculation. You're training your body and your mind that pleasure is safe, that it doesn't automatically have to lead to an immediate ejaculatory finish. You learn to give pleasure, receive pleasure, just savor being close without that fear of failure constantly hanging over you.
Okay, and once that separation is kind of established, what's next?
Phase 2 involves progressing to exercises where the couple is actually inside, but completely motionless. Just lying still together, focusing only on breathing. Maybe synchronizing the breath. One partner breathes in, the other breathes out.
Motionless. Why?
It teaches deep physiological calm and synchronization. And crucially, being motionless eliminates the fear related to time, speed, or thrusting. The focus shifts entirely away from how long am I lasting to how does this feel? The ultimate goal isn't about counting minutes anymore. It's about becoming one, focusing purely on the physical pleasure, the sensation, the connection. When you achieve that, the issue of ejaculation time often just dissolves. It becomes irrelevant.
It almost sounds like a kind of mindfulness practice combined with physical rehab. So this whole systematic professional treatment, it requires real dedication. The sources say 3-4 months. Let's nail down the 3 scientific pillars that make this work.
Right, the 3 pillars work together. They address the physical side, the neurological side, and the technique side.
Okay, pillar 1, the physical foundation.
Pillar 1 is rehabilitating those pelvic floor muscles, what we've been calling the brake mechanisms. This absolutely has to be done with guidings from a specialized physio. This is where you sort out if you're hypertonic or hypotonic, learn relaxation first, then build slow, deliberate strength and control, making sure you can correctly contract and, just as importantly, release the muscles that control the reflex timing. Without a working physical brake, the other pillars won't hold up.
Makes sense. Pillar 2, tackling the nervous system's overactive alarm.
Pillar 2 involves, if it's deemed necessary by a doctor, the careful, temporary use of medication. The sources mention specific SSRIs like duloxetine, which are sometimes prescribed off-label for PE. Now, these meds don't cure the root problem,
Right.
but they serve a vital temporary role. They slightly dial down the sensitivity, the power of the central nervous system's overly trigger-happy alarm mechanism. They just dampen that panic reflex enough to give the man a bit of a physiological safety net.
Ah, okay. So it allows him to actually practice the exercises without failing instantly.
Exactly. That temporary dampening creates the window needed for the behavioral changes, the new techniques from Pillar 3, to actually take root and become learned habits.
Okay, which brings us to pillar 3, the technique itself.
Pillar 3 is doing plenty of those home exercises and drills we just discussed, the phased approach. This is where you actively practice the new skills, but again, this pillar only really works if the first 2 are in place. Once the brakes, the muscles are working right, and the alarm, the nervous system is a bit quieter, then you can successfully practice the advanced techniques, slowing down, breathing, refocusing from fear onto pleasure. That's the path to lasting control. Hashtag tag outro. So the big theme, the non-negotiable thing weaving through this whole deep dive really comes back to mindset. You absolutely have to find a way to stop feeling so ashamed about it. Sometimes you just need to cultivate that sense of, well, looseness and almost say to yourself, okay, if I'm going to ejaculate, I'm going to ejaculate. What can I do about it right now?
But that shift towards acceptance, that looseness,
Yeah.
it's not about giving up, is it? It's more like the immediate first step towards progress, because it instantly lowers that negative emotional charge, the fear that makes the physical situation so much worse.
Exactly. It reduces the anxiety. But, and this is crucial, that passive acceptance has to be immediately followed by active engagement. Getting the professional support, working on those 3 pillars we talked about, acceptance plus action.
Yeah.
We need to maybe think about sexual development like learning photography.
Okay.
Anyone can grab a smartphone and snap a photo, right? Press a button, done. But real photography, that's a serious art form. It requires understanding techniques, settings, light, composition, patience.
Right. It takes skill and practice.
Exactly. And a man needs to strive to be a photographer of his own sexuality, not just someone who randomly presses the button. The kind of sex you have in your 20s really shouldn't be the same as the sex you're having in your 40s or 50s. You have to improve yourself. Ejaculation control is, for many men, a known weak spot. You have to consciously decide to strengthen it.
So the question for you, the listener, is pretty direct then. Does this actually bother you enough? Do you genuinely have the willpower to dedicate 3 or 4 focused months to really solving this? Because remember what the sources hinted at? Expectations are high these days. Effort needs to be visible. The bread, as they say, is in the lion's mouth now. Are you ready to do the work?
And the incredible promise, the guarantee that comes through loud and clear in the material is that once this problem is properly solved using this comprehensive approach, the improvement is permanent. You don't just slide back to square one.
That's huge.
It is. You'll essentially get your driver's license in those 3-4 months. The issue itself will be off your daily agenda, but you'll likely keep refining your skills, keep getting better, becoming a true master driver over the years that follow.
That 300-month period of really intense, dedicated focus seems to be the absolute key. You can conquer this, but it demands that specific commitment.
Absolutely. So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. You've heard what intense, focused effort over just a few months can achieve in perhaps the most intimate area of your life. Now think about it. What other aspect of your life, maybe a professional skill you want to develop, a fitness goal you keep putting off, maybe deepening a relationship with a friend or family member, what else could be fundamentally transformed if you applied that same dedicated 3-4 month focus, that same intentional effort, turning something you see as a flaw into a genuine source of mastery?